back. Recommendations.
I so move.
Arlen?
I'll second.
Kate? Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 5-0. We have some personnel items, no vote necessary, so we will move to public comments. Dr. Anderson, would you like to start for us?
The first public comment that I'm reading tonight is from Candace Pennekamp at 610-6110 Patterson Court. Hello, thank you to our teachers and staff that keep our buildings open. We know how harmful closing school was for our students in so many ways. Going back to online learning would be a failure on our part almost 2 years into this. Please continue to push back against Public Health Madison-Dane County and their overreaching mandates and guidance that takes decisions away from our families and our school district. Please be ready to implement a masking optional policy when the current mandate expires. There are many examples of how this is working across our state, basically everywhere except for within Dane County. I also want to continue to point out that school districts outside of Dane County function without COVID protocols. How nice it would be for our district to catch up with this. I'm really tired of my kids still being affected by policies that are giving my kids anything but a normal school experience. Thank you for your time. The next one is from Casey Ray at 1671 Bonner Trail. Dear school board members, as we embark on yet another year of COVID restrictions, I ask that you continue to do what is best for our children, which persistently remains to remain in the classroom for in-person learning. A transition yet again to online learning would be detrimental to all students and staff. Please do not let our school union behave like those in the Chicago School District refusing to come to the classroom. Our children's learning, well-being, and mental health matters. This pandemic has no end in sight, so I ask that you continue to keep our children in the classroom. Sincerely, Casey Ray.
Kate, would you like to follow?
Sure. The first public comment is by Amy Babala on Main Street, and it's regarding protocols and safety for COVID-19. Members of the school board and administration, with the extreme rise in cases of COVID-19 currently and the strain on our healthcare system, I would urge you to please consider tightening the enforcement of the safety protocols in our schools and to offer a virtual option that is feasible for teachers and students for those that need it at this time. I know that virtual learning was a strain on everyone, both teachers and students, and it is not an option that works for all families. However, in the current situation with the extreme transmissibility of the Omicron variant and the drastic rise in cases that is leading to a record number of child hospitalizations, I would like to ask you to find a solution for families who need a virtual option at this time. If we say that we cannot go to virtual learning because it does not work for all families, then we also have to acknowledge that in-person learning does not work for all families, and there needs to be an option for them as well. There are a number of reasons families cannot send their children to in-person classes with the current situation with the Omicron variant. Health risks for the student, health risks for an immediate family member, mental health concerns with being in person, the high number of cases in the community, and the transmissibility of Omicron variant will inevitably lead to transmission at school. For families already at high risk who are taking every precaution possible, school is the biggest risk of exposure. A virtual option for those families can mean that their students can continue to learn, stay with their class, and remain safe while we get through this current wave. As we are seeing around the world, we can expect an intense surge in the next weeks. Because the district did provide an in-house virtual option last year, my hope is that there are lesson plans that were created that could be used. There was also a lot learned through the experience that I think could make another move to a virtual option more workable for staff and students. The only current option for virtual instruction is WEVA, and that is the option that is continually given for families that ask for something other than in-person instruction. As a family who went to WEVA last year, I can tell you that it takes WEVA a minimum of 2 weeks to enroll a student. WEVA's own information also tells you that it expects to take 4 weeks for you to be up to speed and fluent with their system, platform, dashboard, assignments, etc. From our personal experience, it also took them over 4 weeks of emails and phone calls to get my student into the correct classes instead of the standard generic grade level classes. So moving over to WEVA is not a simple process and is not a short-term solution. At this point in the year, for a short-term solution, a move in WEVA would be a very disruptive to a student's learning experience and stressful. A move back to in-person instruction later this spring would cause the same problems. I would be very appreciative of any efforts that you could make to think creatively and find a solution that will support all our families in the district and our hardworking staff. If extra administrative positions need to be added to support the technology needs of a virtual option, I would urge you to add those. I'm also concerned about the enforcement of safety protocols in the schools and would urge you to increase efforts to make sure these protocols are being closely adhered to. I hear from students at the high school that masks are often being worn loosely and eating is happening at all times during the day in the classroom. I also see photos on social media of masks not being worn at all the extracurricular activities. I also hear firsthand accounts of students not staying home when experiencing symptoms and not getting tested. If more positions need to be added on staff to ensure that protocols are being followed, I would urge you to do so, so that cases of this extremely contagious variant are not keeping more students out of school. Thank you very hard for your work to care for and educate all the students during these difficult times. Sincerely, Amy Babla and Clyde Drake. And the next public comment is from Kelly Christensen on East Open Meadow. Dear McFarland School Board and administrators, my name is Kelly Christensen. I am the mother of a 5th grader at Wabisa Intermediate School and a 1999 graduate of McFarland High School. Thank you for your continued work and focus towards keeping our kids in school and learning during these pandemic times. As an educator, I understand and appreciate the tough decisions that you are making in the interest of our schools. During this new COVID-19 surge that is moving through our communities, I'm reaching out to urge you to spend some time reconsidering your safety protocols and pay attention to the protocols that you have previously put in place that you may not be adhering to. With staff and sub shortages, I recognize the difficult positions that schools are in to make sure that classes are covered and kids are supervised. I also understand that COVID fatigue is a real thing and we are all tired. What concerns me is that COVID protocols were, in my opinion, already fairly relaxed in the McFarland schools and are now becoming more so. I see photos of indoor recess where 2 whole grades of children are together in gym at once. On January 5th, 2022, both 6th and 7th grade were in the gym, and on January 7th, 2022, both 6th and 8th grades were in the gym. I cannot imagine what contact tracing looks like in this type of scenario. I also continue to be very concerned with lunch, as children have less spacing in the cafeteria than in their classrooms. And when they are in the cafeteria with their entire grade, are maskless. The only protocol put in place, to my knowledge, assigned seats, is there for contact tracing and not to keep children from actually getting infected. I'm noticing that volunteers are allowed in the buildings again. Is this something that could possibly be used during lunch to allow for better spacing at lunch? With a more contagious variant on the rise, this seems like the time to be more vigilant. I want my child to be in school. I want her to learn and grow and thrive with her classmates. I want her to try new recreational activities and explore the unique person that she is. She cannot do this if there's constant disruptions due to quarantines and staffing issues. She cannot do this if school is putting her at unnecessary risk of bringing COVID-19 home to her baby brothers or grandparents who she loves dearly. All this said, I'm urging you to please reconsider. 1, thoughtful protocols regarding spacing and grouping based on science, particularly when it comes to lunch. 2, consistent masking protocols for all staff and students, regardless of vaccination status. 3, consideration of an in-house virtual option to support families during COVID surges. WEVA is a long-term solution, not a short one. Thank you for your consideration. I wish you and yours a happy and healthy new year. Most sincerely, Kelly Christensen.
Bruce?
Yes, I will read a letter from Pat Dwyer, 3575 Beegs Road. Hello all, my name is Pat Dwyer. Do you know me? Nope. Should you? Also no. I was one of the original members of the school reopening task force for the Elmbrook School District as a virtual learning professional, and I have since moved to McFarland. I have 2 children currently in the district, a daughter in second and a son in pre-K. I'd like to advocate for a short-term virtual option for our schools. Feel free to stop reading now if you don't need a reason why. Otherwise, best of luck. While I understand that we have a long-term virtual option, reinitializing a short-term, even hybrid option to get us through the next month or two would not only stand to protect our students, but also our staff and members of both our community and surrounding communities. This isn't virtual signaling. This turns out to be verifiable data. I wholeheartedly want our schools to remain open. That isn't to say that they should be in person unless for students who either make the election or no alternative option. We have been told that it's safe enough to get those kids back in school. I would like to point out that this argument is only about school being in session, yet not a discussion of a hybrid model. Yes, it's likely cheaper, I'd assume, as a district, both logistically and administratively, to say, well, we have a completely virtual option, just do that. We all must know that this is not a practical option for those of us who are looking to send our kids back to school in a few weeks, as the intake of our virtual option is almost a month to get up to speed. Our parents are exhausted, our teachers are exhausted, you're exhausted. Our children, well, they're much more pliable than us. Having a hybrid option will only stand to help our families, our teachers, our kids, including kids who are in isolation or quarantine due to COVID, but also our community, to make it widely through this wildly potent and nasty, simultaneously Omicron Delta COVID wave. Thank you, Pat Dwyer. And my next letter is from Corey Vanderkeef, Normal Road, McFarland. Dear McFarland School Board members and administration, first, I want to thank you for all your work during the pandemic. You have had to make difficult decisions and continue to have to do so. As we are in a new surge of COVID-19, I want to take some time to email you and ask you to take some time to look at the safety protocols in our schools. I am concerned that when the students need to go inside in the mornings at IMMS, that 2 grades are in the gym. This seems like an impossible situation to contract trace when needed. This situation seems extremely unsafe given that we know how contagious Omicron is. I'm also concerned about how our school staff is going to be able to keep track of those who are coming back to school after a 5-day quarantine, who needs to be separated at lunch and snack, and who needs to wear a mask at recess. This seems like a burden to our already exhausted staff members. And I also feel like separating kids in this way at school is going to set up situations for them to be picked on by other students. We have very high numbers of transmission currently in our community and state, and there will be school spread if there isn't already. For our family and many others, our child being in school is where our greatest risk of bringing COVID into our home. We want our children to be in school, but we are in a situation of having high-risk family member in our home as well. I don't feel like the district always thinks of the families in this situation. WEVA is not an option for families who are in need of a short-term situation to keep our families safe. We had 2 students at WEVA last year and 1 this year. We know the time it takes to transfer, get set up for classes, and get caught up. It is an entirely different curriculum and will be far more disruptive than having a short-term virtual option for families. I continue to hear about the mental issues, concerns of students not being in person, and I know that is a real issue. It should also be of concern, the anxiety and stress that some students are experiencing at school now. The worry of bringing COVID home is real. I would ask that the board and administration look at the most updated guidance from the CDC for K-12. They have many recommendations that would keep our students and staff safe, especially regarding sports and testing. Thank you again for all you do, Corey Vanderkeef.
Christine?
I am reading a comment by Leah Zana on at 6031 Sledding Parkway. Thank you, board members and staff, for all you do. I'm writing this because I would love to see the option for virtual learning for at least a temporary period of time. The number of cases is at an all-time high. Our children are exposed to this daily, as well as the staff members. While I understand this can be inconvenience for some families, I am hopeful McFarland will offer this. I understand there isn't one perfect answer that fits all, but I'm giving my opinion and what I would love to see. Thank you.
Okay, and I am going to take care, we got public comment from 3 students here in the McFarland School District, and I want to acknowledge those 3, and then I will read, all 3 comments are identical, so I will acknowledge the students that sent them in and read the comment. It is Zoe Lewis, 6107 Spring Pond Court here in McFarland. Nadia Schwadersky, 6261 Parrot Place. And Valerie Vaserberg. I'm sorry if I hacked up that last name. I really am. 4522 Grizzly Lane. Many students at McFarland High School have expressed the want and interest for increased representation and voice regarding the inner peelings of the schools, superintendent, and the school board. We were surprised when we reached out to request a committee for the superintendent hiring process and felt diminished when we were rejected. Students are the core of the district and the reason each decision is made, as well as when they have the most understanding of what goes on in the schools and what issues need to be addressed. We have worked tirelessly to communicate and have an open relationship with administrators and board members and would appreciate active reciprocation. We have heard that the members have not yet been selected to fill the other committees and hope that you can allow student input on one. This would allow students to feel as though they have a voice in such an important process to us. The new superintendent directly impacts our daily lives in a way we cannot put into words. We request that at least 2 or 3 students are given an opportunity to join the community members committee. We feel it is only fair representation considering our integral role in the community, especially in this context. At the very least, please consider that the students of the high school are really hoping for a superintendent outside of the McFarland community with prior experience who can bring unique perspectives and different solutions to our community. In the future, students wish for better communication with the people making decisions about our lives and hope you recognize our value in these processes as well. Please let members of the Connect Club and other leadership clubs within our school know about what role we may have in the hiring process and future decisions that impact us all. Thank you very much, all 3, for your participation in our school board process. That brings to a close, I believe, no?
I have one person that is registered, and at this time, I would also like to
Very good.
invite anyone, if you would like to make a public appearance by speaking to the board, please utilize the Q&A feature found at the bottom of your Zoom window. In the Q&A feature, we ask that you type your name, address, subject of interest, and whether you have discussed this item prior to the meeting with either a district administrator or President Howery. After submitting the information, I would transfer you over to speak to the board. And at this time, as I had said, we have one person who has registered, so let me read that information and transfer them over. Okay. We have Samantha Johnson at 3589 Bittner Lane has registered to make a public comment regarding COVID protocol. All right, Samantha, I will be transferring you over to be a panelist now. Give me one moment. Okay. And Samantha should be joining shortly.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I just wanted to make sure that we had to give some insight into how the protocols are actually working in the schools and where some changes or empowerment from staff might be useful. So my granddaughter is in first grade at WMCF. She was out of school since December 22nd, when break started. Over break, she developed a cough and runny nose, of which she had 4 additional times throughout the school year, was always tested for COVID and was negative. So after we kept her home, the Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, when school got back into session, so the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, we did a home test on the 5th. She tested negative, and she also received her first COVID vaccine on the 5th. She returned to school on the 6th, on Thursday at 9:30. We received a phone call from the school saying that because she still has a cough, she needs to go home, and until she has a negative COVID test, she cannot return. I went to pick her up at school, asked the nurse if we reviewed the COVID test, when could she come back to school? And I was then asked how many days she had had the cough. I said 10+ days. And the nurse's response was, well, technically she should be allowed to be back in school, but I cannot keep her here. We agreed to the COVID test on Thursday the 6th. She was administered the test, and we were told that it would take approximately 10 hours to receive results. We received no results through the weekend. We called this morning and was told by the nurse that the test must have been lost. She needed to call back, and she needed to reach out to the person that administered the test on Thursday, and she needed to speak to her boss. Upon receiving a call back, we were told that she either needed to take another test or she could come back to school, but she would be treated as if she was a positive COVID student and would need to wear a mask at recess and quarantine for lunch. We said that that wasn't an option. I proceeded to make phone calls to Lauren, which the same dialogue I'm having with you guys now was had with Lauren. Lauren made a phone call and within 5 minutes called me back to say that she could return to the school with no restrictions, of which she did today. So I'm just sharing this story because it just felt like, where the message is that we want the kids in school, there was definitely a breakdown, the test was lost, and that, on Thursday, the nurse saying, well, technically she should be allowed to stay, but she didn't feel empowered to be able to make that decision. And even today, the nurse, the messaging from the nurse is very, very different than the messaging that I got from Lauren. So just wanted to share our stories. I'm sure other families are experiencing similar situations, and hoping that the messaging, to me, the communication breakdown isn't at the school level. It's really, if protocols are put in place, how is that getting to the schools? And then the only other piece I wanted to add was I did look to see where in the policy it states that home tests are not allowed, and I only found it within the section of kids that tested positive and kids that were close contacts that home tests were not allowed. Neither neither of those scenarios fell within our family, so just wondering where in the protocol it states that home tests are not allowed for families that are just being proactive to send their kids back to school. So thank you so much for your time and have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Johnson. Is that it then, Angie?
Yes, that is it. Thank you.
Okay, moving along then. Discussion and possible action on COVID-19 protocols.
All right, we have this as a regular portion of each of our agendas. So I talked with Dr. Merwan today to find out if there are any changes that he felt that we should make in our current protocols. At this time, he did not think that there were any changes that he would recommend. We do have some changes though and modifications, not really with our protocols, but at our last meeting, we adopted the Test to Stay program. We were informed today, I think everybody within the state was informed today by the Department of Health Services that the tests are so low that we can only use the tests for staff. We cannot use them to test on students, which means that the testing that we would test on day 3 and then one day after that, we do not have the test at this time to do that.
So they don't have the physical quantity of tests that they would need in order to do students as well?
Right, in fact, they said throughout when they made the announcement that because of the high demand and that the tests that we have, that we get from them, we can only use that to test staff members.
Wow.
We cannot use it for students.
I thought I
So-
read something from Governor Evers' office that we were getting a significant number of those. Maybe it was something different. I could be wrong. I shouldn't.
Well,
quote it.
hopefully in the future we may get, but at this point, we were informed today that the tests that we do have, we can only use on staff, which means that the test to stay portion, and we had put this in the original when we made the update, that we'd only use that if it was, if we had the tests available. But at this point, we do not have the tests available for that. So that the tests to stay with testing on day 3 and one day after that, at this point, we do not have the test to make that option available. So of course, then the option that is available is the 5 days and then the masking for 5 days.
Mhm.
So that's one thing I want to make sure I brought to your attention because we were just notified of that today. As one of the letters mentioned is that we are going to allow volunteers back into the classroom starting second semester. They will have to be, this is not visitors, this is volunteers, so students that, adults that may come in and listen to children read or may assist in the classroom, they have to have proof that they are positively vaccinated. So when they come back in, we know that they have been fully vaccinated and they have proof of that. But we are going to start allowing that help in during the second semester for those individuals. Obviously, discussion on several of the comments tonight was on having an in-school option. I did write my week's blog on that today, send it out for review, and then we'll have that posted. One of the biggest reasons that we do not have a short-term virtual option is that, one, to try to ask our staff to do both in-person and virtual at the same time, I think is not appropriate. And we do not have the staff available to make a because you can't just select and say, we'll do it for this one, because parents have kids in different grade levels. So if you're truly going to make a virtual option available for a short term, you would actually have to have some of your staff doing the in-person and a person doing virtual. Because to ask a staff member to do both, I've went through that, it just is not, it's not fair or appropriate for staff members to do that. And we don't have the additional staff to basically have a virtual classroom for those students who don't want to participate in person. I do agree WEVA is not a short-term option, but we have had the goal to try to get students in school. We are following the recommendations from the CDC and the Public Health Madison-Dane County. But at this point, it's we don't have the resources to be able to do a short-term virtual option unless we require our staff to do both at the same time, and I don't think that's appropriate.
I think we all received at a point in time today an email, not necessarily for public comment, but it kind of enlightened me in terms of what is expected of teachers in terms of monitoring their students, homeroom students and such. And it just seems to me that we're asking an awful lot of these homeroom teachers and the teachers that need to keep track of kids that have symptoms and how long have they had these symptoms and who's coming back from a quarantine and who's leaving on one. It wasn't a complaint as much as it was for our information, I believe. And at first blush, it appears to me that we're asking a lot of the teachers.
Right. And I would agree with Samantha's comment too. It was more about identifying the holes that we have right now and the processes. And rather than going through each one right away, I wonder if it might be helpful for us to look at the big picture again and the context of where we're at, because the last time we looked at individual protocols was a few months ago, and we're in a very different situation right now.
Yep.
So would it be okay if we had kind of a larger discussion about where we're at generally?
I have no issue with that. Dr. Anderson,
That would be fine.
you want to start us off?
Sure, I didn't have anything planned. Once again, I didn't want to go and get really detailed because I feel like, you know, right now there is a lot of questioning about policies. It's hard to, I'm having a challenging time even figuring out what the policy is. I got a letter today. My son was a close contact, and I don't think it's correct. So I want to make, just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. And I think, once again, like Sam's comment and others about their experience are really critical. So I know that in general, we all are feeling like we want kids to be in school. And I want to change the narrative a little bit about, for people who don't want their kids in person, it's not that they necessarily don't want them in person, it's that they're very afraid, and due to either underlying health conditions or issues at home, they can't have them in person, and there's a difference. So to just say that they don't want them to be there, I think is misleading, and it doesn't represent the challenges that some families have being in school right now. So, 37 new cases today.
Yep.
I also, in a letter, we got that none of them were due to school contacts. I'm struggling with that. I don't know how you can show that those aren't, that they're, at some level, we're not passing through school. Just by numbers and statistics, some of those have to be. So I think we just need to kind of step back and say we're in a high level of cases right now. If we're not going to be offering in person, or virtual option, what are the tightest ways we can keep it under control without doing exactly what I'm hearing you say, which is having all of these policies and procedures that are being put on the teachers to be basically policing kids and mask wearing and other things. So that's why I just want to step
Yep.
back. I'm at a point where I'm hearing various things, and I just feel like we need to get back on the same page about where we're at. And I don't
Agreed.
think any of the five of us disagree with that idea that we want kids in school. That said, I think we need to consider what are we going to do about kids who can't, perhaps.
Let's see, Lauren, would you have any comment or enlightenment for us? Give us your view of Ms. Johnson's situation and the general feeling you have about the protocols that we have in place. Do you feel like we do have holes? Do you feel like we're doing everything we can? Just kind of give us an overview.
So I think it's important to remember that we have about one health staff per building. They work with the administrators in the building to do contact tracing and then to contact all of the families of the close contacts and work out whether they're going to stay in school or not.
Can you turn that up just a
No.
little? Okay.
Can you ask her to speak up?
Yeah. What to keep in mind is that our protocols keep changing, right? So, for example, in December, we implemented a test to stay program, and everyone had to learn a different protocol. Then 2 weeks later, CDC and Public Health adopted new quarantine guidelines and isolation guidance. And so while everyone was on break, our health staff came in on that Monday with all new protocols. And those new protocols have now been in place for 6 days, right? So things take a bit of time to get used to. So that's a piece I want to just be really upfront about. It's not as though these protocols we have been working on for 2 years and that it was a miss in the system. It is the fact that the protocols we've had in place were for 6 days. Things, it takes a bit to figure out what is in place. I do all of our updating of our COVID policies on the website, and I have just made those updates and finalized them today. So all of these changes, they just take time to get used to and for our families to understand them, for our staff to understand them, to work with our health staff and our principals to really be clear on, wait, can they come back in 5 days or do they come back in 6 days? And so it's just really knowing that language, and it's hard to do. Last Monday, we have had a lot of positive cases, and so we have typically, when we've had new protocols, have had a few days of just 1 or 2 cases to practice them, or in the last 6 days, right, we've had 80-some positive cases. And so, and one health staff per building, plus our administrators helping with the contact. So that's where I think it's just a lot right now, and that's why I think things feel like they're getting missed.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you feel like we can be comfortable knowing that the protocols that we have in place here today are in alignment with the protocols or recommendations that Public Health, Dane County, Madison is looking for?
Yes, we're not doing anything different than what Public Health has outlined, except for our test to stay program, which now we are not going to be able to do because of access to those rapid tests. But other than that, our protocols do align with what Public Health's recommendations are.
Okay.
But Lauren, we're not the only school that isn't doing the test to stay. It sounds like it's statewide.
The test to stay program, remember, had not been finalized through the Department of Health Services. So they were going to finalize it in early January. We were just early to the game with test to stay. So the school board came up with at least 2 testing times, one on the 3rd day and one day after the 3rd day, but that program has not yet been implemented through the Department of Health Services or Public Health.
Anybody else have any questions for Lauren, or?
Well, I would like to make some additional comments, is that I know that the principals, and I know Paul Ackley, our athletic director, send out continual messages to the staff and the students about wearing of masks and, the proper fitting of masks. So it's not that they're not being lax about it. They're trying to do what they can with the staff to keep reminding people of why it's important. And the reason for it's important is so that we can continue to be in person at school.
Oh, absolutely. Now, I do attend a fair number of extracurricular activities, and I know when I do peek at social media now and again, it seems like the idea that our protocols are not being followed at these events, it simply isn't true. I mean, there are people that will take advantage of any little thing that they can in terms of a mask wear or any of our protocols. It's difficult on visiting teams and fans, especially because they're not accustomed to wearing masks, because they're from outside of Dane County. But I personally think that, sure, we could tighten it up some. I think Paul does an excellent job of making sure that the announcements before all the events lay the protocol out, and it's understood that it's a Dane County and Rock Valley Conference protocols. So to say that the protocols aren't being followed isn't true. Could it be tighter? Probably. And I suspect that Paul and the coaches will accept that. I don't think it's an issue. Anything else?
Well, I know we're not going to specific policies, but if the test to stay is not going to work for us, then I think we do need to think about, for non-vaccinated people, to go back to the old policy, because the reason why I know I personally voted to approve it was because of test to stay. So if people are not vaccinated and they're close contact, moving that back to 10 days as a possibility. The other issue, not an issue, but masks. Thinking about using cloth masks now. What about the idea of getting better masks for our staff and students, and making that available? I know that in Madison, Michael Johnson asked to get quite a huge number, I think 200,000 of the N95 masks.
That's what I read.
And
Governor Evers. They got back to him immediately.
Yeah, and I texted him and he said tomorrow we'll know how to access those, because I thought we could maybe be a part of that Dane County pool of masks for. I just think we need to be a little bit more forward thinking instead of going back to the old protocols. Like, what are we now in the midst of that we can be a little bit more proactive? And I do have to. I continue to be concerned about the comment that there's no COVID transmission at school. I read that a couple of places, and I don't think you can prove there's not. So I don't think that that's accurate for us to say that.
What do you think about that, Lauren?
Christine, I'm curious on where that was that you saw. It's not in our template. So if you could forward me what you received, that would be helpful to me.
Yes, I received an email today where it said there was no COVID transmission in school. And the reason why I think that's a concern is because that would mean if I read those words and took them literally, I would say to Micah, oh, just keep doing what you're doing. You were a close contact, but there's no COVID transmission in school, so we don't have to worry about this. Now, Micah wears his mask, and I know he will, and he's been told to wear it for 10 days, so I know he will. But if that's the message going out to parents, then we as a community are not going to be as on top of doing the right thing when it comes to school. The message will be, well, we're doing fine, but we have 37 cases today, but none of that's from school. So I just think it's not the right message to be sharing right now, when all of us should be vigilant to make sure none of those cases in the future come from school. And we can't prove that some of those cases are not, so that's not an accurate statement. I just want us to be vigilant. I want someone, because we know not everyone's going to wear their mask at the basketball game. They take a swig of water. It's down for a while. I want someone to say, hey, put your mask back up. I mean, that's where we have to be right now until we can get these numbers lower, if we want to stay in school, which we all want to do. So, some thoughts.
Was that in the notification that Michael was a close contact, or in our, like, there were 37 cases today emailed?
You know what, I'll send it to you later, if that's okay.
Okay.
Dr. Anderson?
I don't know that I have anything additional to add on that topic. You know, I did say in my blog, if someone has an idea on how we can provide, I'm open to ideas and suggestions. It's just that at this time for the virtual, short-term virtual option, the only way that I can see that it's feasible is if we ask our staff to do both.
Correct.
And I just don't, I would not be in favor of that.
But, okay, so Dr. Anderson, I'm looking at our reverse metrics, and they're not, we're above the number of cases per school. So how do we explain, or how do we get around that we're not following the metrics that we've approved?
Because if you take a look, when you read the reverse metric, it basically doesn't say they're a hard and fast number. What it says is that when they get to that is when we will take a look at what those options are. But it doesn't say when we get to number X, we will close down. So when we get to number X is when we end up taking a look. And remember, even when we put the reverse metrics in, we now have the opportunity for vaccination. So when you're vaccinated, now if you become a close contact, the rules they're different. You don't have to quarantine if you're fully vaccinated and you're a close contact. So we can have close contacts, but that doesn't mean that those students are going to be out. What it is how many are testing positive and all that. And even that has changed with when people can come back.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of discussion from the CDC and the recommendation, but even theirs is after 5 days, if you're positive, you can come back wearing a mask. So, but our recommendation for reverse metrics were always, that's when we would take a look at it, but they were never hard and fast that they would close.
How about staff levels? How are we doing in terms of staff calling in sick or availability of subs?
At least for the last 4 days, we have had more subs than we have had absence. So we have a certain amount of dedicated subs.
Yeah.
So they have not all had to be used by taking the place of a teacher. Now, I will tell you that we are in better shape than some of our neighboring schools, in Maine
Yes.
County even,
Yes.
because like a couple of them have now discontinued all staff development. You cannot leave for staff development because it's basically all hands on deck. So we did have days when we did not have enough subs to cover. But the last 4 days, we have had enough subs to cover any of our absences.
Well, that's good news. Hopefully that trend continues. Any other discussion?
I think, a couple things. Number one, Lauren, I know you have a very hard job, and I fully understand that it's very difficult to keep up with these guidelines because they're changing so rapidly. I mean, in the healthcare world, we feel the same way. I think right now we're at a high transmission in this county, this state, this country. So I think asking Lauren and her staff to even be able to tell, to be honest with you, if we have in-school transmission or not, is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely impossible
Mhm.
because people are everywhere.
Right.
COVID is everywhere.
Right.
You could get it at the grocery store, you could get it at Walgreens, you could get it at school.
Right.
So it's just, it's too much of an
Yeah,
ask at
right.
this point. I'm just being realistic.
Yeah.
It's a shame with the Test to Stay program. One question I had is if these parents decide that they would like to do a rapid test at a Walgreens or a pharmacy that's offering rapid testing, is that an option for them?
It could be. So in our original guidance, it was. I think part of our testing, I would be hesitant thinking on the access that some of our families have to pharmacies or other healthcare providers, that could be a strain on a family to have to take them somewhere, and then that's the only way they could access food. And right, like you could say, but it would be better to have some than none at all. That would be your decision, but I know that could be a hardship for some of our families to schedule those appointments and get their kids there.
Okay.
And because we can't accept at-home rapid tests as a result.
I think honestly, my biggest concern here is based on the email that we got earlier today regarding the ask for the staff when it comes to the kids who come back after 5 days and are masked, but maybe are younger and they're having to keep track of their snack times and when they're eating and who's on day 6 of quarantine versus who's on day 10. I mean, how do we streamline that? I don't know what a good process is, but I think that's just such a huge ask and was such a quick change to the guidelines, even though we're following what the CDC is saying, that I think we just need to be cognizant of that. If a teacher has 20 kids in their classroom and 8 are following those guidelines in some way or another, how do you?
Well, we have created templates that we keep, obviously updating, that we use at each of the buildings to try to streamline it so that, it basically goes through and, takes the name and who's been a close contact and what day they are. So, we do have basically forms that we provide to, to help guide, but they have to be modified and updated. And of course, every time, we do make some change, but we do try to consistently come up with forms that we can use through all the buildings to help streamline it as much as is practical.
But I think the message that I was hearing from the email is that the educator's job to be doing on top of all of the educating as well. So I echo Kate, saying, especially for you, Lauren, I agree with you wholeheartedly that the protocols keep changing and that falls on you and the staff. So my first reaction was, how do we get more help for Lauren and the staff, since they are really the key people in this at the schools? So that's my first question. Well, my second is, are we asking you to spend your time on things when we should be asking you to be spending your times on different things that would be more valuable? And that's a rhetorical question. I don't think I have an answer for that, but I understand what you're saying. If there's 37 kids, multiplying that by close contact is just, that's the first thing I thought of when I got the email was, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much time is being spent on that, and what is that really stopping the spread? Is it keeping kids in school? So I'm just kind of blabbering now, but we're also recognizing how it falls on you, and the systems and processes are not easily changed when the protocols are changing all the time. So I just appreciate that. The other thing I want to say, though, is and I'll go back to the reverse metrics, is what I'm hearing. It feels like the elephant in the room. What I'm hearing being said is there is no condition in which we would go back to virtual learning.
Well, we have already this year had where we've had classrooms that we have turned virtual when the number of students within the classroom made it so we had to go virtual. So I'm not saying that we won't. I think one thing that we are in similarities with all of the schools in Dane County, because we meet every week, and I think one of the messages is that we may have to close down a classroom. It may become conditions we have to close down a grade or even a building. But I think what all of us have as a common theme, which I think is the theme in the goal of this board also, is that we are going to maintain in-person instruction for as many people as we can. for as long as we possibly can. We may have to close down certain segments if it becomes more feasible to have that as a virtual section, because we have done that. We've had virtual classrooms at times during this year. We've had the teacher teach the class virtually. It's usually at the elementary level. So it's not that we wouldn't, but we're going to do everything feasible to be in person if we can. Because to not be in person creates a huge problem for parents out there if all of a sudden we're asking that they have to find daycare because we're not going to have school in person. I mean, that creates a huge issue on the other end.
I would argue, I mean, I understand what you're saying, Christine, about the idea that, there's been maybe a push that it sounds like there's no transmission going on in the schools. But I think it really depends on the families. I mean, if you actually have a situation where a parent is there watching the kids, is really watching very closely who they contact or if they're in contact with anyone, but that's so different from so many other families who are just literally laissez-faire. It's just they're on their own, and in some ways, as bad or as imprecise as our system is, it's better than that. And I think that's what probably most people are saying. But I think the one question that you bring up, which is I think a very legitimate one, would be, do we go from, and it seemed to me that was what this one teacher was saying as a recommendation, maybe drop the 5-day and just go to 10 and just keep it pretty much the same for everyone. Which, again, for Lauren, it'd be changing protocols one more time, but is it worth doing that, looking into that? And I don't know. I guess I want to ask Kate, really, I really respect you being in the profession. Do you think it will make much difference?
So I think based on everything I've heard from the CDC, the reason they changed the guidelines to 5 days is just because of the transmissibility of this variant. And so what they found was that people were they passed transmission the most in the first 2 days before they had symptoms, and then the following 3 days after, as long as they were fever-free and starting to feel better. Because it's taking, so they're looking at this on a much broader spectrum, right? When you look at the young, I'm just gonna bring up parents of young children, so maybe they have a child in kindergarten, but they also have 2 in daycare who aren't vaccinated. These kids are getting pulled out of daycare for close contacts pretty much on a regular basis right now. Parents are out of sick leave. Like this goes far beyond even just school, right? So when they had to decide from a work purpose, how long are we keeping these people out? How long are we keeping these kids out? That's what they decided. So I think this new guidance is more based on the new variant from what I understand. I think we would be hard pressed to, so our best option, in my opinion, is always to follow the guidance of the experts, right? So if the health department, the public health, and the CDC are saying something, to me, it makes sense for us to be in line with them. If we're asking something different, that's when it gets really difficult. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
I just think that when they made these protocols, they didn't think about the fact that we would have kids here in various states of their quarantine having to eat lunch and do things, right? Mm-hmm. So that throws a whole new wrench in it. I mean, as far as, I just think when we look at these things, we have to remember, number one, 2 years ago now, we were in a totally different world, right, than we are now. We know more about COVID. We don't know everything, but we know more. There is a vaccine now that's available to our entire student and staff population. And I think that has to change some of the decisions that we're making now that maybe we would have made differently in the first 6 months to a year of this pandemic. Now, It's always gonna be tough, because there's always going to be families who have a reason to not have their kids here because of what's going on right now, who always have a reason to do short-term in-person, and I think short-term virtual, and I think in a perfect world, I would love if we could offer both. I would. I mean, I would love to present that option, because for all the people that want to be in person, there's many who are concerned and want to be at home. It's just, as Dr. Anderson was saying, I'm worried about the staff. I mean, there's just so many stressors in general. I don't know what the right answer is here.
Would maybe loosening the restrictions on these volunteers possibly
Well-
take some of the load off in terms of monitoring kids and, how many days are they back from their quarantine?
Yeah.
Who's leaving? Who's eating together? I
So,
would think maybe that would be a place where the volunteers could be very helpful.
so that was my next question, is if we're gonna allow, fully vaccinated volunteers in, how can they help, right? So it's great to have them reading with the kids, working, with behavior issues and helping the teachers, but maybe having parent volunteers or volunteers in general who can help kind of police that would be very helpful. And maybe even, I know there was a couple letters that had concerns about lunch protocols and, having volunteers in the lunchrooms to kind of help police that too. I think those are all,
Mhm.
And some of the principals have
Possibilities.
asked if they can have volunteers for that, and the answer is yes.
okay.
And I know that I have heard, this is strictly anecdotal, but for the older kids at least, it seems as though there's evidence that might indicate that they're probably safer from transmission in school because of the masking and the protocols that we have in place than they are outside of school, because the older kids especially, they don't just go home and sit, when they're out of school. They're probably together unmasked more often than not outside of school. So I don't know that there's data to back that up. That's just what I have heard and to some degree what I've seen. So I guess that's another perspective. I agree with Kate. Best case scenario, we could have some sort of an in-house short-term virtual option. We don't. I would love to be able to solve the problem by making the families that want to have in-person happy and also making those that feel like they need a short-term virtual solution. I would love to be able to make them happy as well. I don't know that we're going to be able to do that. WEVA isn't a great short-term option. It just isn't. But it is an option.
Well, it's a long-term virtual option.
Yes.
That's it, it's not short term.
Yeah, it really is. It doesn't suit itself to any sort of short-term solution at all.
So instead, if that's gonna be the case, then, and I know none of us wants to go back to teachers doing the simultaneous. That's not the model I was thinking. When I think about doing a virtual option, that would be the educator's only role, like it would be virtual or not. But if that's not on the table as a possibility, going back to the basics then, what can we do and control within the schools through the protocols to make it as safe as possible? Like, how can we not relax at this time? And like I was kind of trying to think of ways in which we're all vigilant and we really do push vaccination. We consider getting better masks. I mean, just, there's got to be other ways beyond what we're thinking right now to do a better job of keeping people safer.
Well, you had mentioned earlier the possibility of at least considering or looking at moving the isolation time back to 10 days for those that are unvaccinated, positive test, or close contact.
But
Yeah.
remember, if you do that, you have been making it a point of following the CDC
I understand.
recommendations. So all of a sudden, if you determine that now you're going to pick which ones that you're going to,
I'm not
Put you in
advocating
a-
for it.
Yeah, I don't actually remember the exact, I just remember we made the change because I think the request was that the quarantine time be decreased. And for for vaccinated folks, did we move it to 5?
it was to bring everybody back since we did universal masking. Of course, then this was back when we were looking at optional masking and all that. And then we went to universal masking, and Dr. Merwin was in favor of coming back at 5. Now, since that time, even, the CDC has made its recommendation to go to 5 days, so now the CDC is for 5 days, and then you can come back 5 days masked. But we're already universally masked, so everyone has to mask in ours.
Is there any other? Arlen, you got anything?
No, I don't.
Christine, anything else you'd like to talk about?
We can look at whether or not we can get those upgraded masks and make them available, so we'll look into that tomorrow.
We
And-
actually, just on masking, we have always offered non-surgical masks to our staff and students. That has always been an option, in all of our buildings. So if kids forget their masks, we have a disposable non-surgical mask. And just this week, the state, Department of Health Services sent out a survey to all schools, seeing if we needed KN95 or N95 masks, and they would be free to us, so I signed us up to receive, I think, around 300 KN95 masks.
Fantastic.
Coming in the next few weeks.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Lauren.
Lauren, do we know, have we found out what percentage, what was it, the 5 through 12 grade, 12-year-olds? Did we ever get any statistics on that?
Yes, it has all been posted on our website by grade level on the data dashboard.
And that's what we got I think we had that at our last board meeting. Yeah.
Yes.
So it hasn't changed that you know of? Okay,
It is about the same.
okay, yeah.
If there's nothing else on this topic, I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention that this Wednesday, the 12th, is National Pharmacist Day. So I think our pharmacists around town certainly deserve any kudos that come their way. And I know there are a couple of initiatives out there in social media world with some folks looking to reward our local pharmacists with some free lunches and those sorts of things. So there are ways you can contribute to that. But boy, if there's anybody that deserves a lot of credit nowadays, it's our pharmacists, because every time I drive by virtually any Walgreens or any Forward Pharmacy or there's lines everywhere. There's lines at Forward Pharmacy 20 minutes before they open. It's they're working very, very hard right now. So anyone out there who has a chance just to thank their pharmacist or pay forward and buy him a sandwich or something, that'd be fantastic. Moving on, we have a high school early graduation request.
In December, you had several requests that came in for early graduation, and you acted on them and approved them. We had one latecomer that has now come in that we're also recommending for approval for early graduation. It's met all the requirements.
Okay. I would move to approve the early graduation request as presented. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Kate, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Action on first round superintendent interview date.
What date I am recommending is Friday, January 21st, to start at 8:00 a.m. That is a staff in-service day. That way we can involve staff members without having to find substitutes. It also gives our administrative staff a chance to better participate, so by using that day for some of our administrators and staff to participate in the interviews, it allows it to do with the least amount of disruption
Yep.
to a normal day. So that is my recommendation for the first round of interviews.
And on that day, we'll have secured three places for the various
Yep.
committees.
He's actually already taken a look, Jeff Mahoney and I, and we think we can accomplish all 3 interview committees in the upstairs learning center. We can utilize some of the classrooms, which
Yep.
have walls in the area, so that they're all close enough, so though
Yep.
they won't be able to hear each other, it won't be a major transition.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic, and it'll give us a chance to show off our new learning center for those that haven't had a chance to walk up through there.
Wait, I have a question, though. Will the candidates be able to see each other?
Yeah, but that's not unusual.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I would think
That's-
that always happens.
That happens quite frequently.
It's showtime.
I mean, they
Go there
won't
and-
hear each other, but they're gonna see each other as they transition.
Yeah.
So
Right.
they'll see the other two, I mean, triads of 3, they'll see the other 2 people that are in their triad.
That happened last time around as well. They did, I mean, there wasn't any much chit chat. Some of them knew each other. Yep. But it was more or less just a passing during movement.
I guess I thought when we talked that my understanding was people participating as a candidate was kept confidential until we were at the final round, and that breaks, we can't keep it confidential if they know who each other are.
What it is that when the press requests it, you don't have to release the names of who it is. It doesn't mean that they can't see each other. It means you don't have to release names to the press. On the final candidates, then you have to release names to the press. So if the press were to call and say, who are your candidates you're interviewing, the first round you don't have to, in the final round you have to. But, I mean, it's, even when you only interview one at a time,
Yep.
almost every time,
Mm-hmm.
in almost every interview, those two people see each other.
And the ventilation system in those rooms is gonna be pretty much state-of-the-art.
Yeah, there, I
Good.
mean, it gives us an area where we can have them close, but no group will hear another group.
No, I'm just concerned, I'm looking at the next action item, and I just know that there'll be some people who will be reluctant to want to do this indoors, they'd rather do it on Zoom, and I don't think it's nearly as effective via Zoom, so, but I'm trying to reassure those people.
Jeff?
If you're chosen.
Why don't we, Jeff, have you got, Jeff Mahoney, I'm sorry. Do you want to talk briefly about air handling, air changes, those sorts of things in our learning center?
Similar to all of our other buildings, we stepped up as required in this latest COVID situation we've had to make our filtering systems the best they can be. Air exchanges 3 times the amount we've been ever before. So, and as someone mentioned earlier, this is a nice chance for our candidates to see some of the prized possessions that we went through with our community and built.
Okay.
Thanks,
very
Jeff.
much. Anything else? I would move to hold the first round of superintendent interviews on Friday, January 21st, 2022, starting at 8 a.m.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Action on superintendent position interview committee.
All right, we are looking at 3 interview committees, one made up of the administrative, the A Council and Paul Ackley, one made up of staff from each of the buildings in our district, and one made up of parents and community members. I have presented lists to each of you with the suggested members for each of those committees. The one change is that Christine did email me today and would like us to add Amy McCullough's name to the parent and community member list. So if there are any other changes that people would like to do for you decide on the voting, this would be an appropriate time.
Do you have easy access to what are the numbers on each committee? We have 25 on one and
Well, yes,
9 on
I mean,
another.
I have them all in front of me, so just a quick count, so. There'd be 11 on the administrative interview committee. There would be there'd be 22 on the staff committee, and there would be 18, and if Amy McCullough is added, 19 to the parent and community committee.
Okay, that's manageable, I think.
The only question I was gonna make is, I am concerned, I haven't talked to her, but I am concerned that one of the people that I suggested, one of the former teachers, I know her daughter is a doctor, and I know that she has been trying to stay out of any kind of gatherings. And that's part of the reason why I asked Jeff, or you guys asked Jeff about the air quality. And so it's Judy St. Clair. If Judy doesn't do it, I guess I would like to have an alternate for her. I'd rather not have another body in there, but if Judy doesn't do it, Dodie Keel, who we mentioned on Saturday,
Yeah.
just to replace her. And I don't know, I guess I'd go with asking Judy first.
Mhm. So the plan right now, Dr. Anderson, is that it's all in person?
That is correct.
Yeah.
And what it is after once you approve the committees tonight, then I'll contact each of those tomorrow. There may be some, especially in the parent, that, for whatever, cannot be a part, but that's why you have some extras so that,
Yep.
if somebody can't, and you're still gonna have a representative community.
And I appreciated the students asking to be on it, and I was
Yeah.
wondering if that was something we could add to the committee.
Well, one thing, no students ever reached out to me, so it wasn't that no one ever reached out to me. One thing that I have had happen in the past that I think would be a way to involve students is that when you do your final interviews among any of those candidates, is to have a group of students lead those individuals, give them a tour of our facilities, gives them a chance to talk with them on an informal basis, and then to have the board call those students in, after their last tour and simply ask, they've had a chance to meet the final candidates, which, give us your impressions on, what you at least felt in your interactions, because that it would be, it's a low-stress environment for the candidate, it's a low stress for the students, they can engage in conversation. In fact, when I was hired in Williams Bay, that was one of the things that was done, is that students were the ones who took me around, and the board called them in and said, well, tell us what your thoughts are on those candidates, and they gave theirs. So that gives a chance for, 3 or 4 students to show the individual around and have some discussion and come back and give input to the board.
I think that's great, but I don't think that's gonna satisfy this group that doesn't align with what they're asking.
Yeah.
They're asking basically to be, active
And
members on these committees.
I'd like to clarify that. I got a letter. I thought it was more about this group called Content from one of the individuals. And first of all, I didn't respond because I was sick. I was just feeling so under the weather. But when I came in on Saturday morning, I did share that with Dr. Anderson. I said, in fact, I emailed them that. In fact, at the time, I didn't realize that she had sent it only to me.
Mm.
And, you're one member of 5. So I asked Dr. Anderson what he thought of it, and that's when he talked with Craig. And you're right, in a sense, technically, we didn't vote on this or anything else, but it was just one of these things
Mhm.
that was all part of Saturday's just enormous meeting. So that's how it came about as such. And I did respond to that individual last night.
I mean, if the
I did.
board would like to have, let's say, 3 students be a part of either the staff or the community, what I would say is whichever one ends up being smaller, we could simply have, ask the high school administration to, to work with the student leaders to select 3 individuals that would want to come in on that Friday, because remember, that's their day off, to sit on it, so that would be feasible. I mean, I wouldn't have any objections. I would simply have Mr. Finstead talk with the student leaders and to have them choose 3 individuals that they'd like, and then we'll put them on one of the committees.
I do like your idea, though, so I don't think it has to be an either or, it could be a both and. I also like I was thinking that that's a really informal way for them to get to know the candidates, but when we set up the final interviews, there may be presentations that we could also invite the students to listen to, which is a little bit more kind of getting to know maybe their philosophy and other things, whereas when you're taken to tour, you're just talking about more informal stuff. So I think any opportunity to have some student voice would be appreciated.
Yeah, and like you said, they're not exclusive, it doesn't mean we couldn't have that.
Right.
But if the board would like to have some student representatives on one of the initial interview teams, we could do that. We just wouldn't know the names of those individuals. We would just say, I would say, since number 3 was mentioned, that we would have the student leaders pick 3 students to be a part of the initial interview process, and then we will find the appropriate committee to put them on.
Okay. Jeff Finstead, might you be available tomorrow sometime to have a short meeting?
I can probably make that work with my contact tracing.
Okay. Do you have any feelings one way or the other regarding student representation in these interview committees and such?
When we hired Sarah a few years ago, we had a student committee. But we actually, we're hands-on, they're raising, working with Sarah, the board was to do that. I will say this, when I hired teachers, a lot of times I will do the informal tour. I learned more about that candidate, what they believe, or how they feel, how they look at them, that teacher raising. So I spoke to one of those students today, and I can ask them what they think about the walk around, superintendent. That's really pretty good guy, but get a feel for that person. Yeah. But I can certainly speak to you tomorrow, or I'll also try to track down one of the students.
Yes, you
That
can.
went to happen today.
Okay.
Okay.
No, that's fine. Thanks a lot, Jeff. Okay.
So, just do you want to add 3 students onto an interview committee? Just so that when you make the motion,
Yeah,
I don't see why not.
yeah, I can make the motion. So I move that we go with the list that we agreed to on Saturday with the additional substitution mentioned today, and also include or invite enough students that 3 would be available on that day to sit on the committee.
And did you include the person that you?
Yeah, she did.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yep. I'll second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion
and
carries.
I will start reaching out to all those individuals tomorrow, and I'll give you an update
Okay.
by the end of the day tomorrow.
Next is pretty simple, I believe. It's just change the regular meeting date from a week from today, the 17th, to 2 weeks from today, the 24th.
Right, and the reason for doing that is initially you would have had just the 17th. Obviously, that wouldn't work because we didn't have school that day, so this was actually a special meeting, because we only had one, and the 24th would be your regular scheduled meeting.
Yeah. Do we need to vote or
We
anything?
have to make a motion? I'll
Okay.
make that motion to move the regular meeting from the 17th to the 24th.
I'll second.
Harlan? Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Let's see.
Adjournment.
I think we're at the end.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Bruce?
I'll second.
Kate? I won't bother asking for discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much, all.
And I will send you all an email, probably towards the end of the day to.